Well, good evening. Welcome to the Future of Education. I can't express to you quite how excited I am to be able to bring you this event tonight. It's been a really long time that we've been planning it, so apologies if I get a bit too excited and speak really fast, but I'm very excited to be organising this event. It's something that I think as a veterinary industry, we've got so much potential and so many different ways that we teach, but looking at different ways for the way we communicate and the way we engage learners is something that we're at a point where really we could take to an entirely new level. Tonight, we're going to look at the ways in which someone from a completely different industry to our own has taken very standard and unengaging teaching that is done for mandatory training in cybersecurity. And they've made that an entirely immersive experience, which is really fun, really popular, but most importantly, it's more effective. Simeon Quarrie is a filmmaker and storyteller who started his career in wedding photography. He worked on that for quite a few years and has pivoted to different areas of video production to a point where he is very well known for the skills and products he makes within the video industry. More recently, he's become a keynote speaker and maker of educational programs. He's worked with brands such as Sky, EY, Barclays, Lloyds Banking Group, ITV, and even Apple. Some time ago, he actually spoke at an Apple conference in San Francisco. So tonight, I'm very, very happy to have him with us to tell his story and explain how he's made cybersecurity fun and engaging. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Simeon, and we'll start the talk.
Hey people, so it's awesome to get to hang out with you all. Please forgive my attire because this is a real work day for me. So I'm really grateful that you've interrupted it and you've caught me in my work overalls. Firstly, I want to just check that if you can use your chat. Can you let me know if you can hear me clearly and let me know if you can see me clearly? In the chat, just put yes, that would be fantastic. And then I know that we are looking and sounding, well, I'm not going to say looking good, but at least hopefully we are sounding reasonably good. Awesome. So I can see a number of you there coming in. So we've got Emily there, we've got Ian, Caroline, yes, Emma, Janet. Naturally, I'm pronouncing names that I can pronounce correctly, so that makes life easier for me. So thanks very much for taking some time to hang out. I am an accidental, it was funny actually, what was it? It was Business Insider that labeled me as this kind of accidental hero, a bit like a teacher and educator, trying to do things differently. But I actually struggled very much with learning as I was growing up. I was very much the kid in the back of the class who found a lot of the lessons actually quite boring. I was easily distracted, and my parents were a bit worried about me because, of course, I wasn't doing well in the academic side of things. I had the special needs teacher. As an 80s kid, I was very much the type of, in that kind of class where it was, you remember the OHP, it was just about the whiteboard, and it was definitely the worksheets. And I was, in some cases, sometimes a number of months behind. And I realized that the lessons that I particularly enjoyed were those that had some form of creativity in them, because it kind of resonated with me. They were lessons and forms of education that were interactive, where I could kind of get involved. And they often had some type of storytelling embedded in them. And then I realized that when the lessons had that type of format, all of a sudden I engaged a lot more. I kind of got it. So as I went into perhaps some of the later years related to education, I started to hack my learning by gamifying it, by making it creative, by getting involved in storytelling. And it so happened that there are millions of people that are essentially probably like me in school that were found things pretty boring. And in fact, I think this had an effect on the type of jobs and roles that I decided that I would go for, because I looked at university as something that perhaps wouldn't appeal to me because I didn't enjoy the formal or formulaic method of learning. I didn't go for certain jobs because the style of learning and the style of education, well, it didn't resonate with me. So I went my own route round, and eventually I kind of landed in this position whereby Vivida, essentially what we do is we take subjects and we make them matter so that they stick. Now, one of those key principles that I realized that I was doing as part of my own education process is I was taking these subjects that were complicated and I was, in essence, trying to make them really simple, right? Like the kid does, right? You kind of say, but why? Do you mean this? And I was doing a lot of that. In essence, what I was doing, I was taking something that was very complex and breaking it down into its most simple forms so that I could digest it. And in a way, that became a little bit of a skill set. One, I ended up getting involved in forms of education or public speaking, whereby I would take complex subjects and I would be one of those individuals, for example, that would explain it. And the only reason I was essentially brought in to get involved was because when I spoke, people kind of got it, which is because when I learned, it was very complex and I needed to break it down into something that was easy to understand. And in essence, what I realized as a pattern is we were getting hired, my team, Vivida, as we became known as an adults and a little micro team, we were engaged by large businesses to take complex subjects and break them down into something that was easy to understand. We would take subjects that were boring and we would turn them into something that was engaging. We would take subjects that people were apathetic towards, like they cared about elements of the subject, but they didn't care about all of it or didn't care about any of it. And we would turn it into something that mattered to individuals. And that's where, over time, what we decided to do was we would decide to take a subject itself, and we would take that subject and we would choose a subject. It could be diversity inclusion. Right, as an individual, it's something that I have at times. Naturally, I've been in some ways discriminated against, absolutely. And for many that, for example, you may be a lady in a particular industry and life is not easy. You may come from an ethnic minority and things have not necessarily been easy. And because of my own pathway, I'm helping people to build empathy, to understand and use storytelling. Well, that became something that I knew, I can do that, and I can find ways of using creativity and storytelling to do that. Another subject that I decided to tackle was cybersecurity. Now, with cybersecurity, it was a subject that I absolutely did not care very much about. And the reason that I ended up caring about it was because one day it was actually a week before payday. And as a smaller business, every single payday was an absolute milestone. It is still a milestone today. It's an absolute milestone. So all of a sudden, 7 days before, I looked in my bank account and it was 0. And that's not the figure that it should have been. And then all of a sudden, that figure went from 0 and it basically went directly in to something that was much, essentially we ended up, really starting to try and, change things up. So we went on this particular journey when it came to, all things that were related to education. And in essence, sorry, I just lost my place there. And one of the key things for me was that we went on this education journey. We had to educate ourselves because we were wondering, why was our bank account empty? All of a sudden, when the bank account went from 0, which is where it shouldn't have been, to minus, we're like, right, what is it? How can we educate ourselves to work out what this is? My bank account told me that something had happened. There'd been some type of incident. We'd done something wrong. And I thought, well, why is it that I didn't understand this subject of cybersecurity? So there, what we ended up doing was deciding that more people needed to understand this particular subject. And we decided to change the way we educate it by getting involved. Now, how would we change the way we educate? Well, in essence, the way we would do that is we would try to take the subject of cybersecurity and make it resonate with the younger version of myself, right? I would make it resonate with the little version, the little Sim. And so for me, if you remember, it needed to involve creativity. It needed to involve storytelling. I liked kind of technology as well, and that resonated with me. So I thought, can we bring that in? The other thing that I realized was that if we were going to get involved in this educational zone, right? And I really struggled with thinking of myself as a training provider, because of course I saw training in one way, which was as I did as a young child. If I was really to get involved in that, I had to find ways of making it appealing. And that was going to be using storytelling. It was going to be using creativity, and it's going to be perhaps using forms of technology. So Vivida went on that particular journey. Now, what we ended up doing is utilizing technology like virtual reality. Well, when it came to a subject like cybersecurity, we sent people into the underground environment of the dark web. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll show you a screen that hopefully just gives you a little bit of a visual as to what the environment was, some of these environments that we started to build up. So I'm going to see if I've got some sharing capabilities. I also do apologize in advance that if I share my screen and you see something you shouldn't do, I apologize. I don't know what notifications are going to come up on the screen. So here we go. If I share, and I'm going to share with sound, and I'm going to share an entire screen. There we go. 3, 2, 1, and voila. Okay, hopefully what you see now is my screen, and then I'll just share this. Oops, there we go. Are you seeing my screen there? Hopefully you are. So we started to create these 3D environments, right, that we'd have people explore and go in. We would create this storytelling narrative whereby we would take a subject that people were maybe not that familiar with, and we would use this kind of creation of a 3D environment to create this more scenario-based exploration. Now, we get to do this with cybersecurity in a way maybe that some other subjects wouldn't. So, for example, when you think of cybersecurity, certain images form in your mind. And we played with that. We've played with elements of the cyberpunk, for example. We've created elements of the future. And so what we did for Lloyd's Banking Group is we sent people using virtual reality directly into the dark web to explore these computer stations, to observe what criminals had done, which is using storytelling to change the direction and the narrative. So you see the subject from another perspective, and also start to create these little micro simulations, as it were, so they could understand what it was like maybe to experience an incident from the other side. Now, from a learning perspective, there's a couple of things that are interesting in there. One, yes, we are working perhaps with creating an environment, right? An environment that they can then identify with this particular subject matter. We need to make this environment and this way of learning something that people remember. And we've done that visually. We want the production value to be really high. And we're going to anchor it in that way. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to start to use a scenario and use story. Now, let me explain why I think that's quite important. Right now, I believe that when people do forms of training, many of them are like the younger version of myself, whereby they slouch back. Like the moment you get asked or told to do some form of training, and particularly when it's related to work, you get that notification. And I don't know if if you're like me, you get that notification and you're like, okay, well, it can wait a little bit longer. So I've got a month to go. Right? So you put it off, and then you get that reminder, oh, I've got a week to go. I'll do it in a week. And you want to then put it off. And eventually, well, you click on it and you have to do it. And what's your body position? And you get this kind of click next mentality, right? You're just trying to get through it. You're just trying to get it done. You're trying to take images of the right screens. I know you've done those tricks, right? Take images of the screens so that you can then use them when they come to the questions. And you try and gamify it a little bit just to get yourself through the process as quick as possible and as painlessly as possible. Now, contrast that to the behavior that comes and the expectation that comes when you watch something like a Netflix, when you get involved in something that was maybe related to some form of computer gaming, the standard that you expect is actually is very high, right? And anything below that, well, it's not something that you choose. It's not something that you choose to do. Now, what we wanted to do with education was we wanted to try and find a way of creating something that people would choose to do, or if they were told to do it, the moment they tried just the first opening lines, they would go, okay, yes, I'm interested in this. I'm willing to carry on. So what we ended up doing there is then looking at the values that are in traditional production. Now, where I was lucky is a bit like Toby, I've come from a bit of a production background. So I'm thinking very much about aesthetic and form and etc. and lighting. And so that when people click the button that says, let's start, instead of people slouching back, people then leaned forward. And if you're able to do that, then all of a sudden people then start to be willing to get involved and to take that training and actually to have an appetite to do the next thing. Now, with that visual that I showed you, we ended up for Lloyd's Banking Group being involved and Sky, creating that environment and doing it in virtual reality. However, you may be thinking like me, well, virtual reality, that's not the most accessible thing. So let's break it down into some principles that actually we can all use, right? So virtual reality, COVID-19 came along, the headset wasn't something that was the most practical. So what we did as a minimum is we went, you know something, we're going to create video. Our video is going to be on a certain production level. And we're going to utilize and create online interactive experiences that give people choice as to what they can do and where their decisions then start to have an impact. You may think that actually when you think about what you're doing, perhaps more than the veterinary arena, there's so many things that are based on decisions that you make having an impact. So many things that you do that are actually based on a form of time pressure and having to multitask. What of those principles can we bring in? Now, yes, that's related to production value, but it's also created and designed. We can design this in a way to kind of evoke those feelings and evoke those sentiments of things like maybe it could be pressure, for example. So we looked at how we could utilize that. Now, I'll give you a little bit of an idea. I'm going to try and see if I can bring up a trailer on my screen here of one of the video experiences. And that will hopefully give you an idea of maybe a couple of a different way, or the way we kind of have managed to do things a little bit differently. I am going to bring up, I'm going Ip Dip Sky Blue. Which one shall I bring up? I'm going to bring up this one. I'm going to share my screen again. Apologies if I share something and shouldn't. Please also feel free, if anyone's got questions, drop them straight into the chat box. I'm not sure if there's a Q&A box on this particular session, but please feel free to drop it into the chat box and we'll be able to get to that later on as well. 3, 2, 1, share screen. I'm going to bring up this one here, and this will hopefully give you a little bit of an idea. There we go. Hopefully the sound is playing, and if it's not, Toby, just jump in and shout, no sound.
Agent, this is our holodeck training simulator.
I love this area. I can simulate anything. Watch this.
Put it back. Thank you. This is a home office. With more of us working from home, it's important to spot potential risks.
Like having your children walk in whilst you're on a video call.
That's not quite what I had in mind. Agent, I want you to explore and identify the risks.
Good luck, Agent.
Hopefully that played for you. Now, there's a couple of key principles here. One is we've created a trailer. We're creating a narrative and a storyline as we go through the experience, that we can link these lessons together one after another. Can you use scenario as that narrative and that story as a way of framing the learning related to a particular subject? So here with our series, you might just see at the very end what we're doing is we're creating this interactive series. Now, of course, this is interactive and we've got elements of gamification and we've got elements of, all the storytelling. But when you look at the education that you get involved in and create, what could be this thread that runs through in this narrative that then starts to run through the storylines that you start to create? Is there a way of using that to add to the actual training? And part of the reason for this is when it comes to storytelling, what we do is we root for a protagonist, i.e. the main character. And as that main character goes through struggle and obstacles, which often involve needing to learn new skills in order to get to the next step, or you root for them and you back them. If there's a scenario when this main character, the protagonist, is up against it, well, your heart beats for them and you then start to support them. So in the modules, what we do when we create one, whether it be related to cybersecurity or related to diversity inclusion, we look to see how can we get this narrative and this thread. Now, when it comes to young people's education in school, it might be that it's that mathematics equation, right? Where you go, Johnny has this number of this and Sandra has this number of this. How many of these? Okay, not bad. But what happened when we establish the characters and when we follow that character through a story and a narrative over multiple lessons? Well, does that make a difference? In the veterinary side of things, is there a particular scenario which you can actually move people through one element after another? And as a result, what happens is your instinctive reaction is to follow the narrative, to follow the story, and it gives it that extra depth and it gives it that extra meaning. And so that's one of the things that we've really started to try and look at as we create. Here, when it comes to the cybersecurity, absolutely what we decided to do is create things in a way that there's this sense of intrigue, this sense of exploration, and this sense of discovery. For what we've done right now, we have kind of said, how do people see cybersecurity? Well, we're not going to immediately change that perception. We're going to take the perception and we're going to move it a number of degrees and we're going to add to it. But over time in the story, we will start to move that narrative. As an example, people make certain assumptions about hackers being in hoodies, right? And having a white mask. Can we move that narrative over, over time? We're building out another scenario in series whereby what we're actually doing is we're building out in the set, which is kind of hidden, an interrogation room. And in this interrogation room, it's going to be video-based, interactive video, whereby what you'll do is you will interrogate the cyber criminals and you'll get to ask them different questions. Now, those questions are questions that we may want to ask in order to ascertain an individual's understanding. But by bringing them into the story and giving them that extra element of control, it starts to become really powerful. But that element of story and character is something that we can all use. A principle is the protagonist, the character that you root for, that you back. With our stories, you become the protagonist, you become the character. But what we do is we ask for your help. Did you hear Bav's voice, which she was one of the characters from Doctor Who? She was a voice actor. And then there's my voice. Well, we know more than you do in the scenario as a learner, but we don't know everything. So what we want to do is we want to be there to guide and support you. But what we want you to do, or what we want to do, is we want you to learn and to discover. And as you learn and discover, we'll be going, well done, fantastic. We've learned something new there. What do we learn from that? And by framing yourself or the learner as the main character, as the protagonist, and then having the other supporters, well, this helps. The other thing that we do that helps us with things like the diversity component. We don't want everyone, for example, in the cybersecurity industry to look the same way. Typically, there isn't very much diversity in the industry. So we've immediately split that because we have a male and female, and Bav is Asian, not that you could tell, and I'm Black, but not that you could tell, but it feeds into what we're creating as we do that. The other thing that becomes really important naturally with the training is we start to think about the metrics and the learnings, and we do that by as simple as assessments that we ask, but those assessments can be framed in the story, or we go a little bit further with some of the new things that we're now building. For example, our online interactive escape room. Now, when it comes to the online interactive escape room, we are using principles of creating high production value video, we're using elements of puzzles and elements of gamification. But think about it, for me as that young kid, I didn't enjoy learning. So what in essence I do, a bit like a young kid doesn't necessarily enjoy eating carrots, the moment it's presented in a carrot cake, I started to get an appetite for it. Now, what this does is it helps us to bring maybe people on the journey that wouldn't normally be involved in the journey. And I'm very passionate about that because all industries benefit from including people from different backgrounds, and we learn in different ways. We get engaged in different ways. And often what happens is we get this very, very one-dimensional form of learning that just looks the way it always has. Now, what we've decided to do is create our carrot cake. We've taken our online interactive modules and we've sandwiched them into what we would call an escape room experience. Would you let me know if you would like me just to try and see if I can give you a peek of what that's like? Just let me know in the chat, please, would be fantastic. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll shoot onto the next thing. Okay, we've got a few. Okay, cool. All right, brilliant. Thank you also for staying with me. It feels like I'm kind of talking to myself, but just seeing the interactions here really helps me keep going. So I really appreciate that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek. There haven't been many people that have seen some of this, so it should be fun. Let's just share a screen, and I'm gonna go to here, bro. I'm not going to share the whole presentation because, but what we've done is for myself and Vivida, we've linked up with, we were spotted by the National Cybersecurity Centre. They have a mandate to help people understand cybersecurity. We need to minimize the risk because we all make mistakes on a day-to-day basis, which the criminals take advantage of. And we work to find interactive, cool ways of bringing people on that journey. What we thought we would do is build out a platform that would educate people in groups. Part of the challenge that we have right now is that as individuals, we're able to learn, but everyone's separated a lot of the time. So we thought, wouldn't it be really cool if we could do we would call it we call it security awareness training. It's where we train and we just make sure that everyone remembers and understands the key core concepts. So we would do that in the form of an interactive platform. And what we would do is we would cover key subjects along this journey, but we would present it in a really interesting, engaging way. What I'm going to try and do is bring up a little bit of a behind the scenes in our internal platforms for our video production, just to kind of give you an idea of this. Isn't in the platform itself. I'm actually giving you a little sneak peek as to our process of creating the videos, because we have built it, but for time, I'm just going to bring it into a little bit of a video. This is designed to be a bit of an adventure. It's designed to be, make something that's engaging and do things differently, but this time do it as a team. So I'll press play on this and try and be DJ.
Welcome to the Cyber Escape Room. Before we begin, some things to keep in mind throughout the experience. You'll need to keep an eye on the clock and put your heads together to complete each task as quickly and accurately as possible. In your individual internet browser tabs, everyone can look at the resources in the side panel. You all need to keep checking this so you can help solve the puzzles that will appear here on the host screen. You can switch hosts if you need to in the team section of the side panel. You will work together on some tasks, while others you will need to complete individually and contribute to the score. If you get stuck, you can ask for a clue. But be warned, you'll lose points. In some areas, you can click and drag the screen to look around and interact with some of the objects you see. You may also need your mobile phone at some point, so keep it nearby. But don't let the real world in while you're here, and only use it when instructed to do so. Most importantly, though, have lots of fun. And good luck, agents.
And then I'll give you a little peek, if I can make my way across it in our production environment. This is an environment that the likes of Toby and others will be very familiar with. It's when we're going through the process of creating video components, whether they be with those that are actually in front of the camera as video, or whether it be creating forms of animation, we essentially go through this kind of a production process. And I'll see if I can bring up one more clip to kind of start to frame it. What platform do we use for the interactive group sessions? We can use like this: Zoom, Teams, anything, Google Meet. We essentially have just created a simple platform, Joe, that now allows us to deliver the educational content, but just in a way that people may not typically be expecting it. So let me see if I bring up, that's the mission briefing. Let's see if I can actually, so it's just a totally different form and way of doing it, that all of a sudden people kind of look and go, actually, yeah, I would be interested in doing that. And we want to bring people, we want to lead people to water rather than forcing them to do it. And so that's the process that we've really started to drill down on and started to create. I'm going to bring up this video, and let's see if this hopefully also just adds another layer to this story. And then as you listen to this and do this, think about where you've learned cybersecurity, maybe for your own work related to your own practice and other things. And in the chat, let me know what you think. Would this be the type of form of training that you think, actually, yeah, do you know something? I'd be kind of up for that.
Agents, the criminals have begun their attack on the Corpwire network. It's time to go undercover and infiltrate the cyber criminal underworld, the dark web. We've managed to obtain an ID pass to gain entry into their control center, which is empty because they're working from home. But you still only have a limited time in there. So get in and get out as quickly as possible, and we'll discuss what you discover in the mission debrief. Be advised, if the criminals succeed in penetrating Corpwire, they will lock us out of the network and hold us to ransom. We cannot let this happen. Good luck, agents.
So that just gives you a little taste and a little teaser. Now, what we've done is we've taken story and we are creating this interactive platform. So, for example, if it was veterinary, which we don't do, what would be interesting as a method of doing it is going, right, we've got this particular scenario. Actually turn it into an actual case story where you need to go through and start to look at things and start to analyze and make certain decisions that then have an effect on the outcome. We can start to think differently about the way we educate, so that in essence, it becomes exciting to essentially exciting to everyone. The key thing as a basic, what we've gone through and what we've looked at is some, fairly in-depth, because we've got gamification and we've got, 3D, etc. But if we just dial this back a little bit, you've been used to seeing Zoom calls, right? And you've been used to just seeing the normal Zoom background. But hey, the way we're here in an environment, it's a little bit more intriguing. It's a little bit more mysterious. There's still a certain production value, which I'm very grateful. We still have 57 people here on the session. With the production values being lower, how would that change your perception? Now, what does that do if this was regard to training? So as a minimum, one of the things that we started to look at, I've helped to create training even just via video we're working actually on a project right now for Canon, and we're creating an interactive film school, which I was hoping to be able to show you today, but the powers that be in Canon Inc. have said we can't show any visuals, but I can give you an idea. And so what we're doing is we're helping to educate people about the process of filmmaking. Now, what we want to make sure of is we want to make sure that those production values, even with video, is strong. Now, as a basic and as a minimum, can you have a decent microphone? Now, it doesn't have to be a podcasting microphone like this. It just needs to be a microphone that's close proximity and it's got a decent quality to it. When it comes to the visual, you can actually make some fairly easy decisions that can lift up that production value. Now, I'm taking for granted that what we're talking about here is actually using video and voice and persona to actually carry across these messages, rather than simply relying on the click next PowerPoint style presentation. Because I know for me that when I was seeing those slides full of and decks full of text. When I looked at those decks, those slides, automatically I would start to really struggle because I can't process all of this information. And that for me personally was a barrier, right? And I think that what we want to do is to reduce these barriers by creating something that people can lean into. And sometimes just having a face on screen, having someone talking to you is absolutely key. Now, what we've done, even with cybersecurity, we've created a series of videos, which is me actually going, so what's a VPN? Well, a VPN is essentially like a moat that goes around a city. If you imagine that a city is where your valuables are, your friends, your family, your property. Now, what you don't want is you don't want the enemy to be penetrating and getting into the city. So the way an older city was formed is you'd actually build a moat round and you would fill it with water. And that's so that it became really difficult for the enemy to be able to get in. Well, in our security terms, what we do is we have a VPN. With a VPN, that's essentially the moat around your valuables, which is essentially around your data. Now, all of a sudden, just by a fairly simple explanation, we've now anchored that concept to something which people are able to visualize. We've illustrated it, and then we've applied it. And then as a result, it becomes easier to digest. But also by having me on screen, all of a sudden what I've done is I've humanized it. And part of what we need to do is we need to humanize the process even of learning. And I think that does a couple of things. One, the voice and the power of the storyteller is very, very key. It's not by accident that Richard Attenborough is very popular with his, his grandfather style warmth, as he then starts to explain the concepts related to wildlife that maybe we had never understood before, right? And you lean in and he comforts and goes, let me show you what I know, but he puts it in a certain way. And there's also the voice of a mother that we've all grown up with as children. And when mother told a particular story, that resonated with us for a number of reasons. And so that's a reason why we make sure that our women are involved and they're sharing their knowledge as well, because I believe that there's almost this like a different reaction sometimes when a woman instructs you, right? Partly because for many of us, we've had our mother telling us. And sometimes it's different when our father tells us. So what can we learn from that? Can we make sure that when we create education, that the diversity is built in also to those that are presenting knowledge? You'll notice that when we've created, we've actually got multiple voices at time, if possible. If any of you are doing this video production by yourselves, a couple of things that you can do. You'll notice I'm in a dark background. One of the reasons I'm in a dark background, because if I turn the light on, you would not be so impressed by what's on the walls. You wouldn't be so impressed by the sleeping bag that's in the corner, because sometimes I have to do the all-nighters, and not with the team, but I'm in here by myself. And sometimes what you're able to do is to take certain principles like shut the curtains in your room. The moment you shut your curtains in the room will go dark and you can't see anything, which then means when you add a light into the right position, all of a sudden they are seeing you. And some cameras have got the ability to blur the background. You'll notice here that I'm hopefully in focus and I'm hopefully relatively well lit, but the background is blurry. Some cameras have got those abilities to create that blurry production value, which means that we focus on the subject. Now, there will be those that will already have the equipment and already have the kit and the know-how to be able to do that. Some of you may already have those skills and already have that technology. But as you get involved, and let's say if you are creating education for your own teams because you're doing it yourselves, think about that. That's why the choice of equipment can matter, or the choice of teams can matter. Because it can really start to, with these simple ways, create an aesthetic value that has people lean in rather than slouch back. And I believe that if we can start to think differently in that way, what we end up doing is we can start to change the power of education by making it easier to digest, which that then makes it more appetizing for people to educate themselves upfront the first time, but then to keep themselves educated, because we need to keep this constant form of education. We need to keep learning over and over again. There's no reason why it should be the 1980s version of education that didn't resonate with so many of us. So thank you for listening to me, in a way, just giving you a little bit of a rant and giving you a number of my thoughts as to kind of what's made me tick when it comes to now deciding to, get involved in an area that I didn't dream that I would be involved in. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm more than happy to either naturally we've got some time for some questions now, which I'd love to jam on, and also please feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Toby's got my details. Toby, I'm happy for you to share any information directly with the attendees that are here.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Simeon. That was just brilliant. What a fantastic talk. I mean, like, I've got so many questions going around in my mind, and I can see there's some already coming in on the chat. Before we go into the Q&A, with everything we discussed tonight about how we can use these technologies and use storytelling and video to really make education more engaging and immersive, if you are a company, a university where you've got a course which perhaps is fantastic but isn't standing out, or you're a company where you want to do some training and you want to really make that hit home and engage with people, or you're a drug company, you're trying to get people to sit up and take notice of your product, so you want to learn about it, I would love to be able to help you with that. We've got a limited number of discovery consultations that we can make available. And if you're interested in sitting down for an hour, and we can talk about how we can map that out for you and perhaps help you with it. I'll put a link down in the chat. Feel free to sign up for one of those, and we can have a chat next week. We've got some time in the diary. So we've got a whole bunch of questions that have come in. The chat has literally it's just gone wild with different questions. Okay, so hello e-learning vet is saying, what would you suggest in terms of story for a subject that is boring or unexciting, e.g. tax?
I think that's such a good question. I think one of the great things to do is to start with the question of the why. So why is that as a subject important? If you can anchor that why, and then also think of a scenario that would highlight that why, do a few things, like think about the that kind of, what's the doomsday moment when that tax is not done right? What does that mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And then can you harness that in the story? So, for example, when we go through the likes of an escape room, it might be that we've got, you saw that bit, it was like, okay, we've just been hacked. This is the impact. In fact, we've got a video that kind of involves it, goes, right, this is the impact and this is what's happened. What we need to do is we need you to do this. Or it can be that you start to peel back the layers and you start to go through the storytelling process of starting to, just starting to reveal certain things. So that could be a simple starting point, is just looking at the why, and also try and create often we may actually do this as part of a marketing process, and it doesn't necessarily happen enough when this with the training process. Start to think about creating a persona. So if you imagine, what does someone who's learning, what's their why? Why do they need to understand this subject? Do they actually want to understand it in the first place, or do you need to actually break it down for them? If you build that persona, actually, and in fact, can I be the main character just for a second on the screen? And let's just see if I can dig into this in another way. So, for example, if you see me now on screen, imagine that I'm the persona of one of your learners. Think about the different senses and think, right, how do they see the world? Okay, and what's their understanding, and what do they think on the subject? What do they already hear about the subject? Maybe. What do they see? Where do they go? Build out that persona. It's something we do a lot in marketing. What's their why? What's their pains related to the subject? And also what would be their gain if they were to actually understand that subject? If you build out that persona, one, it's helpful because you then keep in mind who it is that you are educating in your training, and you may have more than one of these. Then it's easier to plot out a story that matters to them. In fact, you make them the character that you bring on that journey. And that becomes much easier because you can go, okay, cool. Well, we've got Graham and we've got Sally and we've got Abdul and we've got such and such. And the reason why, but they want to get to here. Okay, well, how difficult is it to get to a place where actually, when it comes to that taxation, they've benefited, they've done it easily, etc. Well, it's because they need to understand these things. Your aim is to get them from where they are now to where they need to be. And that as a story concept becomes much easier.
That's brilliant. So really, like, it's about making sure that you're really looking at kind of what the key kind of point of your story is, and then actually kind of building the story around that to take people along with you on the journey, so they're actually engaged and finding it more immersive. Yes,
the great thing about story is struggle is part of story, right? And so actually what happens as part of the learning process is, and often you are actually struggling, which is great because it feels so much better when you reward them at the end because, aha, you've actually learned it and you've actually done it. When it comes to the escape room, well, actually, we're taking them through that process. Or when we're going through a series of modules, we may be making an assumption of a certain level of understanding, but we understand where we want them to get to. And so what we do is we go on that journey together, and that starts to make things a lot easier. That's really interesting. I think there's I love stories. I always love stories, and I love the way that we look at the you sit and you just find something, and you often don't realize you're learning about it, do you? If it's actually a good story that's there, like you don't appreciate when you watch Netflix that they're teaching you all sorts of stuff, and you always know the characters' names and their backstories. You're not learning consciously, are you? So, like, And actually, Toby, I'm going to butt in for 1 second because you made me trigger something as well. The other thing that becomes a really simple way of creating a story is actually to harness your own experience. Leverage your own experience. So when it comes to the project that we're doing for Canon, because I've got experience of being involved in creating video, filmmaking, I explain, because that's the purpose of what we're teaching, what went wrong. So it might be that we've gone, let me talk about audio, right? And I can go, the thing as a filmmaker that scared me the most was audio. The reason why is I'm such a visual aesthetic person, probably like you. That's the reason you got involved in the industry. But when it came to audio, that was a thing that made my heart absolutely bump. And there was a time when my shot was set up perfectly and it was great, but the sound sounded terrible. And so the audience didn't like it. Or I had a microphone and it cut out halfway through. So now let's look at how we can avoid that type of scenario. All of a sudden, you've anchored why it's important. You have used storytelling, but it's the more basic form of storytelling, which is a personal experience. The other form of story was the story that I mentioned when we looked at the VPN, right? The moat. In essence, what we're doing is we're using an illustration. It's like this, but we could wrap it and create it into a little micro story as well. And that can be an easy way of doing it. Sorry for interrupting you.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think you kind of get into the whole storytelling aspect, and the thing that's amazing for me is that when we talk about education and we talk about storytelling, we think they're two different things, and I don't think they are at all. Actually, I think that the best educators and the professors and the specialists that we work with, and then the people who are storytellers, actually they're both, the crossover is enormous, and actually the best teachers are the people who can actually take you on a little storytelling journey to talk to you about it. And it could be just, it's a case study of, the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel that comes in with a heart murmur, and what's going on. Well, it's got a mitral valve, but mitral valve disease, and actually how do we diagnose that? How do we give a prognosis and counsel the owner and get compliance with treatment? And how do we make sure they've got the right, how to make sure they've got the right treatment and follow up? But actually, it's the same pathway as saying, well, here's a book chapter about mitral valve disease in the dog. It's the same as tax, or it's the same as cybersecurity. Actually, it's just saying, we're just presenting it in a way that's really, it's just going to work for people. It's going to work for the way that people learn. So
it's easier. It's also because I believe that stories were probably actually created with the purpose of educating, right? It's because we would have been in a situation with real life dangers. And so sitting around the campfire telling some type of story would have either been to tell them of something that was a risk and utilize story, or it would have been to explain some external force, God, religion, that would have people behave in a certain way, so that it created certain forms of behavior. In some ways, it was about behavioral storytelling, is about behavioral change or behavioral control, and transfer of knowledge. So we are, we're definitely in the position that we're able to do that. And when it comes to the questions that you phrased with regard to the that kind of veterinary story that you had there, those type of questions in some ways link directly in with one of the questions that came up at, slightly earlier here with regard to measurement and assessment. It was Alice that mentioned that. So at the very end of doing a storytelling scenario, yes, we might ask the question, well, how do we do that? How do we do this? And then from that, when they answer the questions, well, yes, we're able to get metrics. One of the things that we are also able to do for the type of thing we're doing is, because we can maybe track the a behavior like whether they click on something or whether they do something in a scenario, we can give that a right and a wrong kind of score, as it were, so that when they go through a scenario, that's happening. So for example, if I put this in a cybersecurity sense, we've got the phishing simulator. We have a machine that comes up. And what we need you to do is we need you to identify which emails that are coming in are from criminals and which ones are safe to click on. And you go through as the interaction going, okay, that email, yes, that email, no. That email, yes, that email, no. Now, actually, if I back up a bit, the first thing we've done, we've gone, right, we're going to show you an email. This it has got a number of things on it that are wrong. Can you identify them? And we go through the basic first step of laying the foundationary knowledge, and we are giving them an understanding when they click on an email. Okay. Now what we do is we apply that foundation knowledge by going, can you now identify these? And it's a quick fire. One comes up and you go, yes, no. Another one comes up, yes. And then we go, and now we're going to add some time pressure, and the clock goes on. And all of a sudden that changes the behavior, because when you're up against the clock, and you'll notice from the medical side of things, it's the time pressure that is the part that changes the way people think. So with that heart bumping now against the clock, you're like, next, next, next. Then we make it even more difficult, because what we do is we add in the background noise. Because in real life, when you triage emails, you've got background distractions. So we simulate it. We add in sounds. And so what we're doing is we're getting metrics from this and measurement. And at the same time, they're going through an experience. Now, we talk there about that kind of next level. But even if we do it with regard to the most rudimental form, at least as a minimum, can you do a video and then a set of questions? And from that, can you get that, a number of those metrics as well?
My goodness. There's so many questions coming in. Some really long. It's hard to keep track of them.
I'll try and be shorter with my answers.
Oh, I like it. So one of the questions I have for something like this is that using video, having people on camera is not a new thing. Mm-hmm. And we do it, we've done it for television, we do it, more and more in YouTube, and that's a phenomenon now. But how come that we're taking this into education now? How come it hasn't caught on yet?
I think that's largely to do with the archaic technology that distributes the learning. That's one. It has been, that one of the things we have to do is we've got to make sure that what we're educating is accessible by as many people as possible. Broadband and internet connection is one of those things we have to think about. We have to think about this from a diversity perspective. We have to think about it from a reach perspective. We've now hit the tipping point whereby people are watching video at home and they're watching it in 4K. So when we start to deliver at a lower resolution and size that now becomes fully accessible in a way that it probably didn't 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. The other thing is video done well is not the easiest thing to do. What happens is, well, I don't know why it doesn't happen even on a PowerPoint style. I believe that education also reflects on the brand that is distributing it, not the creators, but the brand or the organization is presenting the training and going, here, you need to do this. The training should reflect that. And so sometimes the minimum viable product is the slideshow. It's the thing you've kind of already got. You're converting the previous paper slide. That's what happens, is you have something in place already, and people go through this iterative process of just converting one to another. If we were going to do this with virtual reality, we would imagine taking just a piece of paper and converting it into a VR experience. It doesn't take advantage of the medium. So the quickest thing for people to do with training is take what's on paper, convert it into PowerPoint slides, and then be done with it. Because a lot of education is actually, for many, about ticking the box and doing what's called the minimum viable option. But what we start to realize now is that there's an opportunity actually to move hearts, minds, to have a greater level of impact. And now, as people are working in environments like working from home, the expectation shifts and it changes, because I'm no longer in a grey cubicle, right, with one little picture in the corner. And I'm not in this kind of corporate mindset. I'm one of the things I'm really passionate about is actually destroying the corporate culture that starts also with training, which includes kind of adding some form of production value into this type of thing.
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. So, okay. So did we see the one from Joanna Walsh about, she worries that if I was to attempt something like this, it would take a very long time, potentially a lot of money to invest in necessary kit, not to be remotely as wonderful as it's likely to be. Not just to be like click neck exercise, and it's far out of my skill set. So her mind boggles. So I suppose the question is like, how do you actually, so if you want to do this, how do you go about doing it?
So I think we've discussed a few approaches, hopefully during the few of these that maybe are not on the utmost, the top level. I think one is sometimes some bits aren't as expensive as you think. There will be someone else who's already invested, that's already got the knowledge, and they can just execute and they can make something happen. Also, there will be training providers in your industry that are already thinking on this level, and all you need to do is take advantage of that and utilize that. If you are a creator and someone that's providing those services, yes, the amount that you invest in it is something you have to consider. So what we're doing is really, really difficult. But it's also a massive commercial opportunity and will have an advantage. A few things that you can do, if you are really on a budget, make sure that the beginning is very good and the end before the questions is also very good. These are the bits that people remember as the beginning and also the end. The beginning is also the bit that frames everything. So can you do something there, even if it means that it's an intro video? Could it be that your review video is something that has a relatively high production value? Now, you may not be able to do it all. Not everyone will be able to afford to do this all the way through every single thing. But if you have particular sections whereby you bring people on that journey, you might find that, let's say you've got 10 chapters, that all you need to do is create a really nice high production video that actually has 30 seconds of each bit and it gets cut into. That might be what's achievable. It might be. So when one of the things I've done, I do is I'm a mentor for YouTube and for Google. And so when we educate those that have got very large followings on that are earning a living from YouTube or want to earn a living from YouTube, one of the great things that I took from one of the Googlers was they said that you don't always have to try to make sure that absolutely every single production is the absolute top of the hill. The reason being is, depending on how much content you've got, it may not be sustainable. So what you do is you may have two different standards. So what you do is you have one that's maybe exceptional, really engaging, and then the others are of an acceptably high production value, right? Or it's developed in a production style that is sustainable. And what you do is you go along and you go, right, I'm going to do for every, within every, might be one fantastic, and they call it, I forget the name of it, but it's like let's say it's the pinnacle standard, or hero content. And then what you'll do is you'll have your more sustainable, slightly lower production value for the next 1, 2, 3, and then up it goes again, and 1, 2, 3, and up it goes again, and 1, 2, 3. Can you think about that as you start to create the structure of your education? And the overall impression will still be much, much higher. Also, don't overestimate the brand or standard that gets communicated with graphics. Graphics or imagery add a lot. Can you get some, what would it take to get some nicer designed components of slides, nicer ways of doing things? That might be just a matter of getting a designer on the likes of a Fiverr, for example, and all of a sudden you just get that slight feel that feels a little bit more modern and a little bit more edgy. Also, can you just move? Some of you have got environments, right? They're actually really, really cool. Well, can you get the camera or get the team who's filming into the environment that already looks cool? Because and do it in that way. Is it about camera aesthetic, but it could be literally. We've done some videos here where we've gone, right, these are all the tools you need. Let me explain them to you, and that is already just a little change that can make a real difference.
I think it's I think it's amazing because often you look at it and it's like looking at anything, isn't it? It's like, I think that like, if you were 14, you want to become a vet, you look at it and you go, how can I ever possibly become a vet? But actually, then you research it, you go on your forums and you go and do your work experience, and someone says, okay, well, you need to do this and make sure you pick the right A levels, and then you go, okay, well, I need to then do work experience, and then you research some more and you go, actually, I think I probably want to go to Nottingham, want to go to Dublin, want to go to Edinburgh or Surrey, and you say, well, actually, I want to go to that vet school, what requirements do they have? And then you just learn about it, and actually you break it all down just like you would do for learning anything, and actually then the path becomes quite easily open to you. And,
yes.
We get lots of people coming to us and they say, we want to do this and we want to teach this in this way. And the fundamental thing we do is just like stories. We say, what's the most important thing that you need to get people to come away from this course?
Yes.
Do you need them to know a certain thing? Do they need a certain skill? How do you want them to know that? How are you going to repeat it? And then we build it around that. So it often can seem daunting, but if anyone wants to have a chat about it, we're happy to sit down and discuss it and just kind of show you how you can do it, and we can build it for you and help you with it. But ultimately, it's just about having a guide who has an idea about how to do these things.
So on that, that's a really key thing. So one of the things that we decided to do is not try and tackle everything, because we prefer to create 10 great things than creating. We don't sell on quantity, we sell on the quality. So what we ended up doing, so let's take, for example, ITV. We knew that we wanted to create a set of cybersecurity training and education for Vivida and for distribution elsewhere, but also, for ITV. The thing we asked them, and they also did, is they went, right, this subject has got all of these things that we want to learn. What are the key things we need people to walk away with? Okay. And what are the key behaviors that we want to change? What are the key behaviors we want to change? In this particular year, we're going to focus on moving the needle on these things. And we did those things properly. It's true that when it goes to, for example, we work with organizations like Lloyds Banking Group, there is no way that they do Vivida style for absolutely everything. They don't, I know that, right? What they do is they go, we're going to do this stuff on a more bland level, because actually, unfortunately, it's a compliance. We need to get these things across the line. But we want everyone to understand that this subject is really important, and this point and this point and this point, and these ones is where we're going to have something that is on a slightly higher level. And so that can be another way of framing it. I can see some really interesting questions in here, which I'm like,
really, I can see. Is that the one from Mark Bowen?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So Mark says, Toby, how many CPD companies are prepared to move away from minimal viable offering? Universities are unlikely to lead this change. because of the volume of content they deliver. Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, the volume is enormous. If one company does this, do you think the profession will value production to a point where they will pay a premium for it? Whew, okay, that's a big one. I think it's like anything, isn't it? I think when you have new technology or something that is different, people will look at what you do and they'll try it a little bit and they'll test it and they'll play it. And then someone gets hold of it and makes a success of it. And immediately then there is a paradigm shift. There's a point where someone gets such a big leap ahead. And if they do it differently enough where people go, actually, what's here is, this is all right, but actually this is totally different, then the whole playing field changes. So I think if there's if anyone out there who wants to try it, I'll be happy to have a chat.
I think as well that it depends on who's making the decision. If it's led by a learner, that's where the shift often starts to happen. The reality is often in the those that are creating the content best. It's to their advantage to keep things as simple as possible, right? To keep it as cheap as possible. And actually, if we all work together in keeping that as low as possible, then the great thing is life is a lot easier, right? What starts to happen is if we actually think about this from a customer experience perspective, we then start to realize that it's a wide gap. And I think that what will take place is, if you imagine you had a number of universities to choose from, and you saw the level of education of one of the universities, and it was like, oh, I enjoyed that. That was a great learner experience as a customer, which is what the learners are, is a customer. I'm going to go there. And then all of a sudden you see a shift because others start to go into that particular university. Why? Because the experience is better. The equipment is, it's like you make a decision of how good are the lecturers? How good is the equipment? What's it like? Am I getting hands-on practical time? What's the campus like? It's experiential. When it comes to the training, the same thing will happen. There will be someone that makes the leap and they deliver that extra level of service that will hit them in the pocket in a very positive way, because there will be a gravitational pull. Then all of a sudden, someone else in the industry goes, whoa, look what they're doing. They've got a unique advantage. We need to get involved in that as well. And it's just working out who's gonna lead it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's a tremendously exciting time we're at. I think the biggest thing that you said that clicked for me probably is that we're at this point now because technology is there. So we have super fast broadband in lots of places. We have it enough where we can facilitate people, doing distance learning almost anywhere in the world now. And the delivery platforms are just ubiquitous. There's loads of choice out there for being able to do it like this. So I think it's a really, really exciting time. We're almost out of time, and I've got one question for you, Simeon, just to kind of finish up. This is my personal question. What I'd like to know is, so it's 2021, nearly 2022. Where are we going to be at 2030? Like, what point are we going to be at? If we're going through this time of change and development with these new technologies, what's it going to be like in 8-10 years' time?
If I have my way, there will be many, including the reader, who changed the experience of learning. I think and believe it's a fundamental accessibility issue. I think that having good education, one, as we know, it's a right. Two, I think that education as it is right now means that it's a gated, it's gated, right? There's a moat around it. And in some ways, I think we have a society that's wrongly built on making education very academic, more boring. And it's like that, which means that you get the same type of individuals going in, right? I may have a love and care for animals, but I would never be able to go through that process. So I think that of training myself formally, using the tools that are already there. So I believe that people will start to really understand that there's a a long-term commercial need because we need as many as possible joining the industry. I think there's a benefit from a diversity perspective, but I also think there's a fundamental accessibility issue here. And in the same way that a property needs to have a ramp that goes into a shop, surely education that is at least somewhat enjoyable can be ingested because it's an audio experience and a visual experience and one that has story utilized in the right place. Surely that ends up becoming like the ramp. And whilst not everyone's going to go to maybe currently a Vivida degree right now, over time these principles will become, we learn from each other. And we will steal ideas from each other. Someone from today hopefully is going to go and go, do you know something? I see I reckon I could do such and such. And someone's going, do you know, reckon I could get some do the videos on a certain standard. And it will just start to become a norm. And I think also as technology starts to become easier, we start to see now that our phones and other technologies, well, they're creating a certain look and a certain aesthetic. We've got a TikTok generation that has just become video editors, right? They understand those fundamental principles. So over time, the expectation will change. The skill sets of those getting involved will change. But the exciting opportunity is, what are we able to do now? And we could just be on that beginning of that exciting journey.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much. I think it's a tremendously interesting time for us to be in right now, and to think kind of the things that we can achieve doing this. Thank you so much for speaking to us tonight, Simeon. Where can people find you if they want to have a follow-up question?
So I'll put my full name now in the chat because I forgot to change it on my Zoom name. I am Simeon Quarrie. So you will find me on most different versions of me on most social media channels. I've also dropped my email in if anyone wants to, just have a chin wag and a chat. I know, Toby, you've also got my my information as well, and I'm happy for that to be made accessible as well to others in the group. And I'm just, I'm just passionate about trying to do things differently, and I love just having those type of conversations. So having a chance to hang out with you all today in a sector related, many of you involved in sectors that maybe not related to my own, has been really enjoyable, and I really appreciate the fact that many of people have just hung out and just had a bit of a chillax. I hope you've been eating and I hope you've been drinking during the course of this particular session, but yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. So if you are interested, and if you are a university, you're in pharma, you're a CPD company, we have got some slots open. I think there's 2 or 3 left. They filled up quite fast. If you're interested to have a chat, we can talk about areas, how we can make more visible, or how we can make courses that are really engaging and really set you apart from the competition. There's a link which is in the chat, and I'd be happy to sit down and go one-to-one and have a discussion with you. If you've enjoyed it, I'd love to know the one thing that you've learned from this talk that you found that you thought was interesting, or you've learned from it, and also anything that you said that you thought we could do better. So just pop those in the chat now. It'd be great to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, that's pretty much it from this edition of the Future of Education event. We'll have another one. We've got another one in the pipeline, and we've got a really exciting speaker for that. So if you watch your emails, and we'll make sure we let you know what's happening with those in the future. But for now, I think that's pretty much that's it from me and from Simeon. And thank you so much for giving up your evening, or whatever time it is, whatever part of the world you are, for joining us. Thank you.